Good evening, this is Viewpoint. I'm Zakir Jacob. There's been a great amount of interest about the origins of SARS-CoV-2 after a British journalist recently put out in Science magazine about how there is the very, very real possibility that this virus actually leaked from a lab in Wuhan. But long before that article, back in January itself, a team of researchers from IIT Delhi had put up a paper for peer review talking about how they noticed certain characteristics in this virus which could have been quote unquote genetically modified. Now, those researchers had to pull out their paper because of peer pressure, because in the peer review they were pilloried by other scientists globally. And therefore, they had to take out that paper from that particular website. One person who was in the loop about this paper and the findings of this paper was Professor P.S. Venkatesh Rao. He's a consultant surgeon with the Columbia Asia Hospitals, and he'll be joining me on the program tonight. But first, let's bring you up to speed with the story. All right, joining me now is Professor P.S. Venkatesh Rao. He was in the loop and part of the team that was looking into the origins of SARS-CoV-2. Thanks very much, Dr. Rao, for speaking with us. Long before, this recent interest that we are suddenly seeing globally about the origins of SARS-CoV-2, you were aware and you were part of this team that looked into some of the specific characteristics of SARS-CoV-2. That paper had to be put on a peer review website and then subsequently pulled down because everybody came hard at the researchers who happened to be from IIT Delhi. I want to first ask you, what is it that spiked your interest? What is it that generated your curiosity about the origins of SARS-CoV-2?
That paper was put on preprint review on a website which is meant to initially put any article that you want to publish, you put it there, and then people give their comments, and then you put it in, send it for publication in a peer review journal. These people put it up in the end of January, this team from IIT Delhi, and one of the virologists who knows me downloaded this article and sent it to me for my views and comments. Meanwhile, by the time I checked into the website, I found that the article has been withdrawn. Luckily, the email of the head of the team, his email was there, and that's how I got to contact them. But I just waited, thinking that the WHO will do its job well, and so I waited. But when the WHO disappointed all of us, and it went on to, and now it has gone on to the comment to make the comment that we can't get any more information out of China, and it became very obvious that the Chinese are not going to reveal anything more. Worse, by then it became very obvious that there were high-ups in the international virologists who were also and researchers who also had an interest in suppressing this whole matter, both because there had been funding for it from US and because they were worried about their own research projects being affected because the funding for it was being asked in the name of gain of function research.
No, so let's leave that aside for a second. I'll come back to that in 1 second. What I'm interested in is, as per this paper which you were privy to, what were the medical or biological sort of evidences that were laid forth which seem to suggest that it was extremely plausible that this coronavirus or COVID-19 was genetically engineered or genetically modified. What did the researchers find medically? What was the basis on which they came to this conclusion?
There are certain published articles which I have highlighted in the last of those 5 articles. And the most important of these two are one, this article published by the IIT people, which clearly shows that it has been genetically engineered because there are certain insertions into this genetic material which could not have come by natural exchange of genetic material, which often happens between viruses of the similar kind. This is exchange between a retrovirus AIDS into this. Secondly, there is certain specific changes that is in the furin cleavage site, which is specific to the human being. It is so this look like, and this is the reason why this looks like an engineered virus. Second, the other article that is very important was published again in January, but this time by the Wuhan doctors, not the Wuhan researchers, by the Wuhan doctors, where they give a date by date details of how many people got admitted and whose infection was proved by RT-PCR test, and if they had gone to the Wuhan wet market or not. And in that, the first 3 cases, right at the beginning of December, are all those who have never gone to the Wuhan market. This is from the Wuhan doctors themselves.
Okay. So coming back to what you said about the WHO team, and you were very disappointed by the fact that the WHO team returned empty-handed, or they were unwilling to point fingers at China and the role of China, and particularly this particular lab. How does one fix accountability in light of the fact that the Chinese are being extremely opaque about this? They're not giving access to either the lab, the Wuhan Institute of Virology, or documents that are contained there. So how does one then prove that this was A, genetically modified, and B, more importantly, how does one fix accountability for that?
It has been made very obvious that you can't take the Chinese government as of now, unless you take some financial or economic action against them. But what can be done is to take action against the individual virologists who were involved with this kind of research in China, and those who collaborated with them knowingly as to what they were doing. So these people will have to be individually taken up, and then the story will will spill out if they are taken to court and individually questioned under in the court against rather than chasing the Chinese government, which is not going to open up, and there is nothing as of now that we can take action against the Chinese government other than the financial action.
All right, Professor P.S. Venkatesh Rao, thank you so much for speaking with us here on CNN News 18. We'll see, and thank you for the good work that you and the team there at IIT Delhi did, shining a light on the origins of COVID-19. Yes, there was a lot of pressure on the team. They had to pull back that paper, but eventually now most of the world seems to be coming around to the view that it's eminently possible that this virus actually leaked from the Wuhan Institute of Virology. Meanwhile, the other big story, and this is a political story of the day, a big blow to Rahul Gandhi in particular, and as much as it is for the Congress party, the party's Brahmin phase in Uttar Pradesh, Jitin Prasada today quit the Congress party and joined the BJP in the presence of Union Minister Piyush Goyal, as well as Anil Baluni, the party's media coordinator. Earlier, he also met with Union Home Minister Amit Shah. He also thanked Prime Minister Modi for this opportunity to serve the people in the Bharatiya Janata Party. He said that the BJP was the only nationalist alternative at the national level. Remember, sources within the BJP are also telling CNN News 18 that Prasada will not just be fielded in the upcoming UP Assembly elections, those are due early next year, but also he will play a significant role in the run-up to the 2024 general election. Let's listen in to what Jitin Prasada had to say as he now joined the BJP fold, as it were, after spending his entire political career in the Congress party.
इस देश हित में कोई दल और कोई नेता सबसे उपयुक्त और मजबूती के साथ खड़ा है देश हित में, तो भारतीय जनता पार्टी और प्रधानमंत्री नरेंद्र मोदी जी। जिस दल में मैं था, मुझे ये महसूस होने लगा कि हम लोग राजनीति में हैं और राजनीति एक माध्यम है, दल भी माध्यम है। अगर आप अपने लोगों के हितों की रक्षा नहीं कर सकते, उनके लिए काम नहीं आ सकते, तो आपका राजनीति और दल से में रहने में क्या औचित्य है?
मोदी जी की सरकार 2014 में आए, तब ये सांसद नहीं रहे, लेकिन उत्तर प्रदेश की जनता की सुविधाएं सुधरे, उत्तर प्रदेश में अपने क्षेत्र में काम चालू रहे, उसके लिए लगातार पीछे पड़े रहे और रेल मंत्रालय के पीछे ऐसा पड़े रहे कि उन्होंने उस प्रोजेक्ट को कंप्लीट करवाया। श्री जितेंद्र प्रसाद जी हम सबको आज हमारी पार्टी के साथ, प्रधानमंत्री नरेंद्र मोदी जी के नेतृत्व के साथ, श्री जेपी नड्डा जी की अध्यक्षता में भारतीय जनता पार्टी में जुड़ रहे हैं। मैं इनका तहे दिल से स्वागत करता हूं।
देखिए, अब उनकी मर्जी, हम कुछ कह नहीं सकते। उनको भी यहाँ भी भविष्य था। अब पार्टी के जनरल सेक्रेटरी भी थे, लेकिन ये जाना अच्छा नहीं था, क्योंकि उनके पिताजी भी कांग्रेस में पहले से थे। रहते हुए भी आज ऐसा डिसीजन लिया, अनफॉर्चुनेट।
All right, Pallavi Ghosh tracks the Congress party for us. She's joining us live. Payal Mehta tracks the BJP. She's also live with us. Pallavi, I'll start with you. It's not so much that, Jitin Prasada is a mass politician of any kind, or that he has some great voter base or a dedicated voter base in Uttar Pradesh. In fact, he's lost the last many elections that he fought. But what is, and I said this at the top of the show, this is more of a blow for Rahul Gandhi than it is for the Congress party. If more and more people who were considered part of Mr. Gandhi's inner circle, first Jyotiraditya Scindia, now Mr. Prasada, and there's also murmurs around Sachin Pilot, if these people are, making a beeline out of the Congress party and joining the BJP, is the Congress party worried about it? B, more importantly, what are they doing about it? What are they doing to stop this exodus?
To answer your first question, yes, of course they would be worried, and any political party should be worried, because when each one of them leaves, they all make the same point that, if you are staying within a political party and are not able to work for the people, then what's the point of doing politics? Now, it's not just a question of Jitin Prasad, but there is a sense of disgruntlement and disillusionment, I'll say, within the Congress party, because unless you don't win elections, then the entire existence comes into question. To answer your second question, what are they doing about it? Well, absolutely nothing. It becomes very clear. I mean, he was one of the signatories to the group for 23 main letter, and there was a CWC which was held. So Sonia Gandhi met them individually. She said all your concerns will be addressed. And what was their concern? Organization in elections, a clarity in leadership, and third, of course, is that we need to be battle ready. On all these three counts, Zaka, nothing really has been done. Even as we speak, for example, there is a committee which is meeting now to sort out things in Punjab, and that's a state which is going to elections in a couple of months. No preparations for Punjab, none for Uttarakhand, none whatsoever for Uttar Pradesh. That answers your question. If you're not gearing up for a battle, when your opponents are working already years ahead, then what is the point of an existence of a political party, as Jitin Prasad himself raised in that press conference?
And very quickly before I go to Payal, how much merit is there in all this chatter about he did not get along particularly well with Priyanka Gandhi or her team, and that if his USP was he's a big Brahmin face for the Congress party in Uttar Pradesh, then clearly he can't outshadow or overshadow Priyanka Gandhi as the Brahmin face in Uttar Pradesh. So how much merit is there in that chatter?
So when he did set up that Brahmin Chetna Samaj, the whole idea which was given to him is that this was going to be a kind of a pressure group which has been set up by him, and it's going to be incorporated into the party's strategy, and that's how it would work. He would essentially ensure that the Brahmin votes come towards UP, and they would then look at the big picture. It didn't happen over time. What happened was that there was a group which Priyanka Gandhi Vadra has set up for UP management, and Jitin Prasad never found a place in any of them. And I think that's where the disillusionment has come in. Jitin Prasad is a very open example. There are many, many such leaders of Uttar Pradesh. Unfortunately, one of them, for example, Rajiv Tyagi, who's expired, all of them have a same grudge, that there is a group, there is a coterie, and we are almost left outside as mere observers.
All right. Payal, as far as the BJP is concerned, and all through the press conference where he was formally inducted into the party, they kept on talking about Uttar Pradesh and his contribution to Uttar Pradesh. Clearly, they're doing this with an eye on next year's assembly election. So, would you attach too much importance to the fact that A, Yogi Adityanath, who is clearly the biggest leader for the BJP in UP, was not present during this induction ceremony? And B, will Jitin Prasad be also incorporated into the BJP, used in the BJP for a chatter that's doing the rounds that there is some amount of Brahmin resistance or resentment against Yogi's government? And also it comes at a time when there is chatter around a potential or a possible cabinet reshuffle in the UP government.
Well, Yogi has not let anything come very easily for the central government, and that's a fact of the matter. And that's one of the reasons the reshuffle, which was scheduled to happen sometime, earlier last week, did not still take place. Having said that, yes, the BJP Zaka will be utilizing the services of Jitin Prasada in the state of Uttar Pradesh. That's the biggest election in the coming times, and that is actually the mother of all elections, because that is one huge chunk of assembly seats, and that also is responsible in the future for 80 Lok Sabha seats. The BJP definitely will be putting on its strength as far as that is concerned, and based on that, they are definitely going to chalk out a road for Jitin Prasada. What I was also given to understand by my sources, in the parties that possibly closer to 2019, I beg your pardon, 2024, if Jitin Prasada's services can be used by the party, in the national level, they'll also consider that. But the party at this point in time has not brought him with any definite promise or any definite condition, because that's not how the BJP makes people join. Even Jyotiraditya Scindia, who was brought in, and everybody thought that probably in the next few months he would become a minister. He's of course a Rajya Sabha MP now, but he's still waiting for his turn to become a minister, even though he's delivered other goods in Madhya Pradesh by helping BJP form the government. Jitin Prasada's presence as the Brahmin leader is going to be definitely a very, very well worth investment as far as the BJP's fortunes are concerned, because there is a clear disenchantment amongst the Brahmins as far as the Yogi government is concerned. And the party thought that it is the best time to do course correction, even as they're looking at still expansion, like I said. But it won't be without taking Yogi or the others into confidence. Of course, the joining is taking place in Delhi because of Prasad's presence in Delhi. And since he's not joining the BJP unit of Delhi, that's not joining the BJP unit of UP, that's one of the reasons he's made his joining here.
All right. Of course, the BJP has made it amply clear on more than one occasion that they will be facing the UP electorate next year under the leadership of Yogi Adityanath. So we'll leave it at that. Thanks very much, Payal Pallavi, for joining us. Let's go to a story in Mumbai, the first bout of the monsoon this year. And it's a bit of a familiar story. I'm sorry to say this. There was waterlogging reported across large parts of the city, particularly in the Mulund area, the Sion area. Chief Minister Uddhav Thackeray today was at the BMC control room, the disaster control room. He directed the authorities there to take measures to check flooding in low-lying areas. The weather department has basically predicted cloudy skies and thunderstorms for the next few hours as well. The Mumbai local services were disrupted in some parts, and so were best buses also disrupted in some of the low-lying areas. And Vinaya Deshpande is joining us live from outside the BMC control room. Vinaya, again, there's a sense of deja vu every time there are these monsoon rains in Mumbai. The BMC does make tall claims about being monsoon ready, so on and so forth. But again, the first spell of monsoon rain, and today large parts of the city went under.
Well, yes, Zaka. In fact, the BMC says it was over 200 millimeters of rainfall that led to the city crumbling on the very first day of the monsoon. I am right outside the BMC headquarters, which is also the Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj terminus, the central location from where many trains leave. But right now you can see the mayhem on the streets. Several people who want to go back home from offices have all gathered here because the trains are not accessible to them. The roads have been flooded. The traffic jams have escalated from several major streets. Buses have been overcrowding for the last few hours. And that's why you see people have been waiting for hours at end to find some means of transport to get back home. Most of these people live not just in the faraway suburbs of Mumbai, but also outside Mumbai in the neighboring areas of Thane, also some other important locations. But as you can see, more and more BEST buses have been coming in. The problem right now, what the BMC says, is that it has started several infrastructure projects in order to make sure that waterlogging reduces in Mumbai. It also claims it has started a project for underground storage of water in several low-lying areas, including Hindmata, where the mayor and the municipal commissioner themselves visited today after it was waterlogged for hours at end. But that project is not yet complete. Several hundreds of crores that are spent on Nala desilting every year, they too have not yielded much of a result till now, is what the BMC, is what the BJP says, and the opposition has targeted the BMC through all this. Even as this continues, red alert for Mumbai goes on, and it is likely that even tomorrow Mumbai may see heavy rainfall. Zaka.
Okay, Vinay, we'll leave it at that. You take care and be safe. We'll see you when we see you next. Meanwhile, as we wrap up a story on a positive note, the Uttar Pradesh government has started what it calls pink booths or pink vaccine booths, which will cater exclusively to women. And there's a very good reason for why they're doing this. It has been noticed that there is vaccine hesitancy among women, particularly in rural parts of the state. There are also lots of rumors floating around about vaccination and menstrual health. So in a bid to try and remove those rumors, dispel those rumors, and to get greater participation among women in the vaccination process, the UP government has started this. Our Prashasti Shandilya has this report.
After pink autos and pink toilets, Uttar Pradesh now has 2 pink booths or women-only vaccination centres. One will be for the 18 to 45 age group and the other for 45 plus. The Noida District Hospital has one such booth.
यहाँ पर यूपी गवर्नमेंट की तरफ से एक स्पेशल सुविधा दी गई है, पिंक बूथ तैयार किया गया है। ये 2 जगह पूरे नोएडा में तैयार किया गया है, एक जिला अस्पताल सेक्टर 30 और एक जेम्स ग्रेटर नोएडा इंस्टीट्यूट ऑफ मेडिकल साइंस ग्रेटर नोएडा में है। और इसमें सिर्फ हम लेडीज को लगाएंगे, 18 प्लस के अबव जो हैं और जो 45 के अबव है, दोनों को 50-50 स्लॉट है। पूरा क्रू हमने लेडीज का रखा है। इसमें जो वैक्सीन लगा रही है वो भी फीमेल है, जो रजिस्ट्रेशन कर रहे हैं वो भी फीमेल है, और पूरा हमने माहौल भी, वातावरण भी पिंक बनाया है। तो ये पिंक बूथ जो स्पेशल चल रहा है।
The decision was taken by Chief Minister Yogi Adityanath to encourage more and more women to get vaccinated, as there is a significant gender gap in the state. A media report has stated that only 769 women are vaccinated per 1,000 men in UP. A closer look at statistics reveals a gender gap in the inoculation process in most states, as more men are getting vaccinated than women. To motivate women to take the shot, the entire vaccination site is managed only by female staff.
जब से पिंक बूथ का नया स्टार्टिंग हुआ है तो बहुत अच्छा लग रहा है। महिलाओं को बिना परेशानी के और बिना किसी दिक्कत के आसानी से स्लॉट मिल जा रहा है। सारा महिला स्टाफ है हमारा काम करने वाला और आसानी से इनका टीकाकरण हो जा रहा है।
As per the 4th National Family Health Survey of 2015 to 2016, only 40% women are allowed to go out alone, including to a health facility. The gender gap in vaccination across the country is testament to the age-old problem of women being subjugated. The 5th National Family Health Survey, released in December 2020, revealed that more than 60% women across 12 states have never used the internet. Less than 3 out of 10 women in rural India and 4 out of 10 in urban India have only ever been online. With these stats and trends, it isn't hard to believe why the digital-first approach too couldn't provide for more women booking their vaccination slots, particularly in rural areas.
बहुत अच्छा लगा यहाँ पे आके, मतलब महिलाओं के लिए एकदम अलग है, कोई दिक्कत नहीं हो रही इससे।
बुकिंग मैंने ऑनलाइन करवाई थी बट कुछ दिनों से हो नहीं पा रही थी, तो अब आज हुई थी, कल हुई थी, स्लॉट मिला तो हो गई।
Finally, when it started today, like pink booth started for the females specially, so I got it registered for me and my sister. And it has been a really nice experience for both of us, since there was no chaos, nothing like that, and the staff was really good and they provided us the best services.
The Uttar Pradesh government has set a target of administering 1 crore doses in the month of June under its Mission June. For July, it is 3 crore doses. More than 6,500 vaccination centres are currently at work to achieve the target. The state government has also decided to take the services of more than 1 lakh nursing students for administering the jabs.
The Uttar Pradesh administration, on the instructions of Chief Minister Yogi Adityanath, has set up 2 pink booths in each district across the state. While the response has been fairly good by the beneficiaries, as the entire drive will be equipped only with the female staff. This has been done specifically to aim women so that they can be encouraged to participate in the vaccination drive and avert the crisis of the anticipated third wave. With video journalist Raju Khatri, Prashasti Shanila from Noida, CNN News 18.